welcome everyone to this session we have entitled Care and Costs, the Impact on Fees of COVID-19. Love to introduce you to our esteemed panel, and thank you to all of you for being with us today. It's really good of you to give up your time. Marie O'Neill is the General Manager of Executive Expatriate Relocations based in Dubai, operating across the Middle East. And Marie, it's always great to have your take, so thank you very much for being with us. Alistair Murray is the Managing Director of Relocation Support Services based in the southeast of the UK, but operating across the whole country, and also one of the EuRA board members. So again, thanks, Alistair. Always good to have you here. James Spears is the Vice President of Global Supply Chain for Clearview, and you're actually based, sorry, Clearmove, I'm so sorry. I will edit that out in the recording, but the live one, Clearmove. James, it's great to have you with us. Thank you very much. And again, you'll talk more about what it is that you do, because your remit is actually very broad as a company. And Fiona Mugano is the Managing Director of Expat Partners based in Paris. Fiona comes to us from the background of immigration. And again, we're going to talk about consulting versus supply and all of those things. So again, Fiona, thank you very much for being with us. And last, but by very no means least, Peggy Love. Peggy has been in the relocation industry for a quarter of a century, 20 years more. And we are now incredibly lucky at EuRA to have Peggy on our team as our strategic consultant for intellectual content. And we've been working together on conferences for the past few years, and we will be working on the next one, which, by the way, we have just moved forward to June next year from March in Seville, because we think it's a better fit and we will hopefully get to it. And of course, for the full forum. So Peggy, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for being with us.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Dom. So I'm not going to speak for very long, but before I turn it over to our brilliant panel, and this really is a brilliant panel, what I want to do is just set your expectations for this session. So as we all know, costs, scope creep, and more for less are the challenges we've really been facing for decades. And even though I've been out of the practicing side of our industry for nearly a decade, I can remember very well, I don't think a day went by in my career that we didn't address these issues and challenges. So it's not what we aren't familiar with, but under this current circumstances with COVID, I think it's sort of a very different element. So this is what we want to talk about today. Please do not expect any golden nuggets. As you know, every company is different, every client company is different, every case is different, every geographical area, and we have that well represented here today, is different. So our panel will discuss, and this will really be a discussion, so I think hopefully you'll really enjoy it. They'll just discuss the challenges that they've been facing for the last 6 months, approximately, I guess it's 6 months now, and what they can and should do as they manage the future or begin to think about what's ahead. And of course, it's unpredictable, but everyone needs to be prepared. So as we start, I just would like you to keep 3 words in mind as these panelists frame their challenges and issues related to care and costs. And those words are expectations, knowledge, and consultation. So I'm going to start with Alistair. Do you want to start and just take us through some of the challenges that you've faced and some of the issues and just what's been going on for the past half year as business has ramped back up again recently?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Peggy. First, I'd just like to say I'm really pleased that we've set aside 3 days to talk about the challenges of the last 6 months, because I think that's what it'll take. We can't get through this in an hour. There's so much to discuss in such a short space of time. I'll start briefly with the first of your 3 words, Peggy, expectations. I think back in end of March, beginning of April, my initial expectation when we went into lockdown was that I was looking at monthly income and thinking of where the reoccurring monthly revenue would come from for the business, thinking of vacant property management and tenancy management and service departments, and that just that regular flow of income, and thinking there wouldn't be too much else for the foreseeable future. And that was probably where my expectation was wrong to begin with, because what we saw was a huge amount of departure activity, a huge amount of renewal activity. So although in the UK we could take advantage of the furlough scheme and we had a skeleton staff running, there was still a huge amount of activity, and that never stopped. We never reached the point where, as I thought we may, go into hibernation mode and just concentrate on back office process and procedure and not have any activity. That never happened. There was always a huge amount of questions and from assignees and clients and suppliers. So we were, because we were on the ground and listening to government guidance on an hourly basis, we were being asked for information permanently, and our operational team were incredibly busy, even though there were fewer of them. April and May was still very, very busy. And then when the housing market did open up in the UK, we thought we could go back to, we were very excited, thought we could start managing some home search programs again. They certainly weren't home search programs as we knew them before. Again, a lot slower, a lot more complicated, and a huge amount of information. So we then suddenly realized that all of our guys were faced with a much smaller caseload, but a huge amount of activity, because for a number of different reasons. So right from the beginning, some of our assignees were originally meant to go on assignment in February, and we kind of tentatively put them on hold then, and then they became officially on hold in March. We kept in touch with them in April and May, and then they started to move in June. So some people, when they were physically coming to the UK, we'd already had maybe 4, possibly 5 briefing calls per assignee, partly because everyone was desperate for information at that time, but also sometimes our guys were saying some of our assignees just wanted to chat. They just wanted somebody to talk to. If you're living alone and you are wondering what's going to happen in a country you've never been to before in your life, you want someone to talk to, and that was us. So our guys were on the phone a lot throughout that time. While you watch your inbox filling up, you need to talk to people and have a personal conversation, not necessarily about relocation, just about what's happening in the world and trying to provide some information. So we became a sort of information hub. And then when people could physically move, it was a cross between a sort of hybrid between virtual and physical viewing. So that's actually, it's more complicated, I think. There's more to that than a standard physical home search program. And I think we were fulfilling a number of different roles as a DSP on the ground. So we were, as we always are, that point of contact for the assignee. But I think we were also filling the role that would have previously been played by colleagues of the assignee in their new office. They'd be asking questions and having conversations, the cliche of the water cooler moment with their new team. That's really important for an assignee when you're in a new country, and that didn't exist. So we played that part as well. So everything was more complicated. Everyone was asking more questions. Every client wanted information, direct and RMC clients wanted to know what was happening on the ground on a weekly basis. So activity was heightened throughout. And I think, as we've had this conversation before, we've had these kind of issues in our industry for years. It's just everything's become a little bit more accelerated and a bit more exaggerated over the last 6 months. So we do all have to find a way of providing information in a fast and efficient and friendly and cost-effective way, but for the last 6 months, just more than ever. So more information, but still doing it in a personal way and not just kind of thinking we need to automate and put everything online. We're trying to find ways of taking administrative burden away from our guys in the office to allow them to spend more time with assignees. So it's the things we've been talking about probably for 10 years that are now more heightened than ever. So to say it's been an interesting, in inverted commas, 6 months as an understatement. And now that we're trying to plan for the future, it's pretty difficult. But it's kind of taking what we've learned over that time and seeing how we can become, a sustainable business and still answer all the questions that people need on a regular basis. So I quite like that element of the last 6 months. I quite like the fact that it's forced us in some ways into being more innovative and think about things in a different way. And so, I think processes and procedures will have to change in the future because of the difference in expectation of the client and the assignee from this point on. So, definite pros and cons, but never a dull moment.
So Alistair, and I will ask somebody else to jump in, but it sounds as if, just listening to you, that you know, you probably had all your processes in place, and even though every case is different, it's some of the same procedures and some of the same things that your consultants did when they were face to face with the assignees. It just sounds as if one thing that it sounds like you did it really well, and I'm sure that all of the companies have been faced with this, and it's the challenge to be so flexible and really, not that you weren't prepared. I mean, who could have been prepared for this? But you know, you sort of like pulling things out of your bag of tricks and making it work, sort of, as we say, on the fly. And I think that's the beauty of this industry that we're in, working in the companies that you all are working in, that you can sort of, as we say in the US, turn on a dime. I don't know what you say in the UK, but so.
I think the word pivot has become very popular in this country.
Right. So from somebody else's standpoint, I don't know, Fiona, from the immigration side of it.
So it's very interesting because, of course, you know, we're very much dealing with administration and paperwork. And a lot of the time in the past, we didn't have to deal directly so much until people arrived with actually the employee. But I totally agree with you, Alistair, that we have sort of had to fill in a role. There was a space which freed up because there wasn't the offices there, because people were distance working, and suddenly there was no HR, there was no, what I would call slightly psychological support for these people moving. And yes, I should think that most of the industry who is good at their jobs, and we're service providers, all of us, regardless of the service you provide. If you like doing that, whether you're a concierge in a 5-star hotel, or you're doing pet services or cars or homes or immigration, it's services. So if you like that, you like people and you like to help. And that's where the expectation comes in. Now, what we found, because we jumped in and we had people stuck all over the place. We had a lot of our clients, well, a lot, that's an exaggeration, some of our clients who actually didn't know where their employees were. So there was a moment when it was a little bit worrying, and then it was worrying because they had people on business trips who got stuck in countries across the world. What are we meant to do with them? Can they fly back? They can't fly back, everything's closed. So we had to deal with that, and we deal with that, that's fine. Then there comes the moment when cost. And all of us at one moment have to think, hey, I've got less cases being initiated and I'm on fixed fees. How am I going to work all of this? So that's where we brought in consultation. And we have been very clear with all of our clients, saying to them, we think that now you probably do need more information specific to your firm, to what you're trying to do, some strategy. You want to have weekly updates on where the immigration is changing. We've seen it with the US, trying to get people into the US. So you have the COVID waiver, the EO waiver, you have emergency appointments to deal with. You can't expect any firm to do that free of charge. It's a lot of work. So where one side we were slightly worried with clients saying, we can't actually start adding on to costs, we haven't seen it. All of them have said yes immediately, because they want to have the information. They want to know how they can continue to move their staff into other countries. So we've actually, that's worked out very well. It continues to work out well. Like you, Alistair, we, and probably the others as well, there is less initiation of case, but we're all inundated with work. We've never had so much work. So one has to build into that, and it's got to be factored in financially. There's no other way around it.
I think it's lovely, and I think just quickly jumping in, and I come into it from a different perspective, because Alice has gone over it from the destination service delivery standpoint, and you're coming at it from the immigration. but from my point, I see two very clear divides in what your service is. As you say, your service is very much an administrative, knowledge-based service that you're having to consult on. And what I see as well is very early when you saw that additional consultation coming in, with all the trickery popping up, if you will, keep it layman, you were quick on that and saying, okay, well, this doesn't, you know, we're delivering the program, but this is beyond and above the program. And you're in a good position as an immigration provider to cotton onto that quickly, because your administrative time is what you say, and the knowledge that comes with that. I've almost, from a buying standpoint, I feel that the DSPs are in a bit more of a tricky position, because they're there to deliver services, be there, consult, kind of be somebody's guiding post as they're coming through. And what, it's a fine double-edged sword, because you either catch on very quickly that this is going to cost you more to deliver the service during this time, and you sit down and you have a conversation with your client and you make that very transparent and you agree on it, or you take the vocational standpoint where you're all service providers and you want to provide that good service, and you understand that this is a point in time, if you will, with the COVID experience being what it is, and you just be supportive through this because you want to keep those clients further down the road.
But it might be rather long.
Well,
it's not going to be a 2 month, period. So, I mean, I think we're all fine. We want to be supportive for 1 or 2 months, and we'll take the loss, and we want to keep our clients and we want them to be happy. But when you think that actually this is going to go on for 6 to 12 months minimum,
yeah,
and for the small firms, it's difficult.
Yeah, and I think this is the point that I'm trying to get to as well, because you've kind of already created a whip for your own back. I know from being with a large RMC that if you do something and you behave a particular way for 3 to 6 months, and then you come to me after those 3 to 6 months saying, you know, this is a lot of additional service, we need to start charging for it. You know, the first response, and it's a go-to from anybody who's in the buying position, is, well, you've not been charging me for the last 6 months. Why are you charging me now? Why do you want to charge me now? So, you know, I think what I've heard so far is, you know, everything that Peggy said at the beginning around expectation setting, you know, the consultation, and I forget the third one, forgive me.
Knowledge.
Knowledge is what's coming in. And I think it's keen for us. Being a buyer, and I've over the last, being part of a startup, which is kind of struggling to bring new clients on now because COVID hit us right where we were picking up momentum. So, you know, for our BD to be knocking on doors and trying to, you know, put their foot in doors, those doors aren't even open to put your foot in right now. So they've had that struggle going through. What we've decided to do is work on our product development. We're well financed, so we can go on doing that. And then from my standpoint, I've been coming up probably to a lot of people that are on this, you know, watching this as well, and trying to build up my partner networks to ensure that when there is a break in the lockdowns, when there is a break in the quarantines, and those borders open, we can go forward. And I've had a lot of interesting conversations with providers. I've had one provider that have referred to their services as, you know, they deliver Mercedes class services and they're unashamed of it. And for me, I love that sort of comment. I'm absolutely on board with that sort of comment. From a pricing standpoint alone, it's funny, a lot of people say lowest cost, lowest cost, lowest cost. And that is absolutely fine. I think that mantra needs to change to right cost, not lowest cost. If you don't want to spend a lot of money, don't ask somebody to deliver you a Mercedes class service at a Mazda class price.
Totally agree.
It's just not there. So I think, and coming back round, you kind of cottoned on and you explained, well, you know what, you want the leather interior, you want all the things tricked up. Well, that doesn't come standard. You need to have the additionals factored into the cost. For those of you that kind of went ahead and put the leather interior in because you thought they'd really like it, and then start, I think it's not about saying we need to start charging for the service that we've been delivering. I think it's a conversation about we need to look at the service that we're delivering and understand that it's not fit for purpose today, and agree on what the service looks like moving forward. Because if you're going to go out and you're going to start speaking to supply chains at different RMCs or clients, and you say you need to charge more when their only interest is bringing your costs down, that's going to take you 10 times longer than actually saying, let's open the door on what the service looks like, and then agree what we put a cost onto that service. So, and I just thought I'd jump in there because I thought it was very interesting that, you know, you managed to catch the services, and, you know, Alistair, you kept yourself busy doing things that you didn't think you would do, but it's taken more. And I'm sure that through that, you didn't always catch the opportunity to say, we need to up the cost because this is more complex now.
And Marie, you had some very interesting thoughts on sort of how to start the conversation with your
It's interesting, and I suppose after hearing James, I kind of think, have I missed the boat now? So, you know, we have basically, to kind of go back a little bit, I suppose, our firm, we do 50-50 immigration and DSP work. So kind of see, obviously, where Alistair and where Fiona's coming from. And I suppose if you look at immigration, Fiona, you will agree, you know, it always was an A to Z process. And you kind of, it was easier to manage the timeline as well, you know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months, whatever. Whereas DSP and the relocation side, you know, you're dealing with emotion, different factors, you know, it has been a much longer time frame and can be more varied. But, you know, from our perspective, I suppose we've sucked it up and we haven't charged extra to date, both on the immigration and the DSP side. And, you know, files that were usually 3 months are now taking 6 to 12 months. And it's like, you know, we're communicating constantly with these assignees, having calls with them, emailing them. So like, you know, a file, we may have 100 files open, but we're invoicing nothing. So it is quite challenging. And then, you know, we're getting to a stage now as well where some of those files we were working on for 6 months are now getting cancelled. So we have been communicating over and back, emailing, calling, and now they're being cancelled. So what do? You know, and we are charging a cancellation fee because we have spent a lot of time and our knowledge on that. And, you know, especially from the immigration side, here in this part of the world, you know, they announce changes and then 2 days later, they revert back to the old rules. So it's constant. And, you know, when a piece of work actually comes to materializing, we have to research it and contact the authorities because what was basically happening 2 hours ago may have changed. So it's, you know, the amount of work involved, and it's quite interesting. Listen to James, your perspective on it, and Fiona, yours perspective as well. And, you know, well done on jumping straight away and charging those extra consultation fees. In a way, I think, God, I should have been quicker. But, you know, and then the other side of me kind of thinks, you know, this is tough times for everybody. And obviously we have contracts signed, we've agreed pricing. So, you know, I have been of the attitude, just suck it up and get on with it during these times because it's unprecedented and it's tough for everybody. But then, you know, how long is this going to go on for? 6, 12, 18 months? Or is it the new normal, which I know people hate hearing that now, but, you know, if it is the new normal, it's, you know, we're putting a lot more time and effort and cost from our side into every individual service. So where is that line and when do we stop?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, because I completely agree with Marie, to make it clear, I'm not running a charity and we don't do all this extra work completely for free. We do it because it's in the best interest of our clients and their assignees. And there are certain additional services that we provided throughout the last 6 months that we would charge for. So we have done lots of extra duty of care around those that are quarantining and providing shopping and some additional services. It's just really difficult, I think, at the moment, as Marie says, to go to an RMC or a client and say, our 2-day home search package needs to go up by 50% because we've had 5 briefing calls. At the moment, I don't think that's possible. I don't think that's realistic to be able to achieve. If someone's done it as a DSP, good luck to you, and I'd love to speak to you, but I don't think that's realistic. I think it's some of the additional services that we've been able to add on. And then, as I said before, I think for us, it becomes quite exciting and quite a challenge to try and work out a way of managing that next year, to say, well, how can we be in a position where if we are charging this fee for this service, how can we strip out all of the data entry, all of the administration, so that we can have regular calls, regular contact with assignees, more so than normal, without spending too much time or wasting too much money on that back office, you know, data entry, working with all the different services and different systems that RMCs and clients have. So that's our challenge. And like I say, that's been the challenge, I think, for probably the last 5 years or so.
So what James was saying.
Questions are starting to pour in. So the first one actually from Dominic, thank you very much, Dominic, for that, was aimed at Fiona, but I think actually all of you have touched on this. So when charging for immigration consultation next to the flat fee for initiation, will that have an effect on the long-term relationship you have with the client? We were just discussing.
No, we don't find. We've actually found the contrary. It's built in a better relationship because we're taking more time to understand the client. And that's something which I think everybody across the industry has realized, that one of the large benefits, I think, of what has happened is that we're now spending more time with the clients, understanding their needs, listening to them than we've ever done before. And now, yes, we all have our Zoom calls with our clients. I have a client who I've never met for 8 years. I've never even seen her. And the other day we had our first Zoom call and she said, this is wonderful. We're actually seeing each other. Why didn't that happen before? So I think that what we've seen is that, no, it's actually built much more trust and we're very clear. And they don't have to take the service. If they don't want it, well, then fine. But they're not going to be able to get, I mean, it's going to be very difficult without the waivers being done to get the person to the US.
Fiona, can I just ask you on that? Are the majority of your clients direct clients or third parties? Direct
most of them are direct clients. And when they're not direct clients, we don't work with RMCs at all. We only work with DSPs.
Because it would be interesting, I suppose, to see, you know, would there be more pushback from third parties? Because obviously you've got another layer involved.
Yes.
So I think there probably would be more pushback with changing the fees and asking for a consultation fee.
So we have seen that with a very, very large RMC. The DSP wanted the consultation. Huge pharmaceutical industry. We're still waiting. But I know from inside, from the pharmaceutical, from the HR, that they urgently need this. They urgently require the information.
It gets a little bit more difficult though, because you now got more cooks in the kitchen, don't you?
Of course. Of course.
You've got a headlining contract with the third party, with the RMC, where they've fixed the cost in place. They've got a contract with their client who's fixed the cost in place with them. So it's not an easy conversation to go all the way up that chain and bring it down. So,
or you have to break the chain. When they go, I mean, when in our industry, when they need to go and see a labour law attorney, the end client, they go and see their labour law attorney.
Yeah.
So for us, it's much easier. For you, I think it's much harder.
There we go.
On the relocation side. But to go back to you, no, Marie, it's, with the RMC there, it's been, we're still not, we're waiting on an approval. The DSPs, we've actually not had any issues on it. Most of the time we've seen that we have a much better relationship with them, because when they're not doing the immigration, or when it's like with you, where you understand the immigration, they're very happy that we take over that and that we're dealing with it with the client, and they're not having to manage that part.
I don't think it's going to be all fluff and clouds, if you will, across the board. I think there will be.
Of course, there are going to be some.
And I think Peggy mentioned this at the beginning. There's no quick fix to this. I mean, as much as you can, straightforward and go and have a straightforward conversation with your client. It depends on their situation and how they've been impacted by this situation.
Of course. And the size of their company. Yeah.
These are all factors that come into it.
There's various factors, and as well, it's your relationship and the client's trust in you as well. I think that's very important when it comes to this area. And
if I might say, where in the world globally the client is themselves, because it's very cultural. Going, in India, and there are a couple of people, including Rowan, is on the call, that's very difficult. Consultation.
Yeah.
It's much harder.
So it's interesting, quite a lot of the comments and questions that are coming in are kind of mirroring what you're saying. So I'm going to try and take them in order or try and keep them within the context of what you're talking about currently. So Marie, you were talking about, if this is the new normal, and we all hate that phrase, I know. This is from Paul Barnett. Thank you, Paul. Will you have the opportunity to review and update your pricing when your contracts expire?
Yeah, that's a good question. When the contracts expire, but a lot of contracts are 3 years or, open-ended. So that's a difficult one. And I think, look, we need to see where we are probably the end of this year, beginning of next year. And I think even if contracts aren't being renewed or expiring, then, and if we're in the same situation, I do think conversations need to be had with our clients for sure.
Yeah.
It's stuck in a bit of a precarious situation there. Sorry. I just, insofar as when that contract comes up for renewal in 3 years' time, it's typically, they're not coming to you to ask you, "Ooh, how much do you want to put your costs up by?" Coming to you saying, "How much do you want to put your costs down?"
And another point that's come in from an anonymous attendee, which is, so if fees are being cut and you're not earning money for a lot of services that are being provided, as both, Alistair and Marie have indicated, how do you then guarantee a sustainable supply chain?
Great question.
That's interesting.
I think that's the point I was getting to, insofar as where the conversation needs to be had along the lines of when that contract comes up for renewal and you're being pushed by whoever it is to bring the costs down. Unless you're actually looking at what you're renewing, you need to literally take up that scope of work that you have in place and say, this is no longer relevant in the world that we live in today. We now need to look at the scope and the cost that you want to apply. So we either start with the scope on what you want to have done and telling me that you want done, what's been happening for the last 3, 6, however long years, and you want that to continue at a lower price, is not going to be sustainable to us. I can tell you now that as a supply chain owner or supply chain lead, I would rather have a very honest conversation with a provider and them saying to me, it's just not sustainable. That conversation may lead to the point where I have to say, Marie, I'm picking on you because I'm looking at the moment. Marie, I absolutely understand. I don't respect you any less for it. However, I'm in a situation where my client needs a lower cost, and I'm going to have to go and find it. But I got that relationship with you, and when I've got a client who's willing to pay a cost for the service that they want, I know that I'm going to come back to you for that service because I can trust your integrity. I would rather have somebody say, no, we can't do it at that cost, and say, yes, we can do it at that cost. And then I have to deal with hours upon hours upon hours of having to fix up problems because you're cutting corners to make that sustainable, and that's turning into a bad service for our clients.
Sorry, Marie, sorry, John. I just think on that, when contracts come up for renewal, I actually think we'll have more ammunition now, to definitely say the prices are staying the same or increasing, definitely not being reduced. And we'll have several examples over the last 6 months of the hours and how the scope has expanded. So, maybe in a way, all of this, a positive outcome will come out of it. And I think, third parties and direct clients, they see our value now and how much we're putting in and how much the assignees are relying on us. We're there for them, and they are needy at the moment. And we're, because we are service companies and we go and beyond, we always go and beyond, and we have those extra calls and those extra emails. So I think we're really showing our value now. So when contracts come up for renewal, it might actually work in our favor.
I would just add to that. Sorry, Peggy.
Oh no, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, just one thing to Marie's point. Over the last couple of months, my experience has been I've had pricing discussions with RMCs that have been great, and they've been very understanding, and they understand, they appreciate the service we're delivering and the fact that we need to charge a reasonable fee for it. Local direct clients also understand because we have a great relationship with their HR team, and we know one another, and they're copied in on lots of different emails, and they see what's actually happening. The issue for us sometimes is when we work with a very large direct client, we have a local relationship, but they're a very big multinational organization. And I end up speaking to somebody in procurement who knows nothing about mobility, doesn't know what mobility is, just has been given the task or the goal of saying, this is how much we spent last year, you need to find a way of reducing that by 10%, and I don't really care how you do it. And it's very challenging to have conversations then about scope and briefing calls and duty of care, because they have literally no idea what we do. It's just, I need to reduce that number by this percentage. So I think it's very client specific.
Yeah.
And that's what when James said right pricing, that might actually be a golden nugget. So I take back what I said at the beginning. Along with consulting with the client company, not just the consultation that's part of your service. I actually meant keeping in touch with your client. Anyway.
And that then leads me on to a very interesting point from Tracy Kautzman. She says, is there a way for DSPs and other suppliers, immigration, to add a clause in the contracts with your clients to allow invoicing to include extra additional costs? This would assure for extra costs being paid. Is that even possible? Oh, have you seen it?
I could probably tell you that as somebody who administers a lot of those contracts and puts them together, it wouldn't go through most of the RMC legals teams getting that would be scratched out.
Yeah.
What for destination services to add in consultation on an hourly basis into your contract? That wouldn't.
Certain additional costs beyond the contract. So it would have to be an addendum to the contract to say that this is a service that we're offering. So it wouldn't be something that you could just add in ad hoc that it's come up. And I know that the particular way that RMCs deal as well is you wouldn't ever do anything without getting approval beforehand. And Fiona, you're saying you're still waiting.
The same. No, yeah. But we're exactly the same. And we never ever do anything without having an approval from whoever is the client. That's for sure. I just have one question which I'd like to, if I may, Peggy, throw out, because it's just come to my mind, is as we're going to see a big change in global mobility, and my thought is that there's going to be less mobility, but it's going to be more directed to talent and those who are really needed. Maybe that would allow an increase because the budget's the same, but it's not going to be spread out in the same way. What do you think, James?
And once again, and I'm sorry, I'm going to probably sound like a stuck record on this one, because I do think it is about the right price. You know, when you sit down, and I fully agree with you, I think it is going to slow down significantly. Even what you were saying earlier on, you know, just crossing borders, we can still do it. Mobility is never going to die. It can't. You know, the world's got too globalized now. Companies need people in different places to make things happen. Just the volumes are going to be impacted, and how you administer that and make it relevant to who you are moving. And even if it is still an engineer that you're trying to get somewhere, or a project team that you're trying to get somewhere for, you know, building up infrastructure, the complexity around that is probably a little bit more challenging than it was last year this time. So there is space to talk about what is actually required. You could probably find yourself in a position, and we were discussing this before as well, you know, putting lower cost services in place where you're delivering less. I guess you're now sitting with a problem where you've got vocational people who are used to going over and beyond and want to, by their pure nature, deliver services. So, you know, I think, Alistair, you said this, where you don't want to be sitting down and speaking to your team and saying, you can't deliver that much service. We just haven't contracted for it. So
doesn't work. I've had that conversation.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
A part of my strategy and is I don't necessarily want to have a network of all the same providers that are going to give me every service that I want. If I'm looking for a low-cost service for a client, I want to go and find a low-cost provider that delivers a low-cost service. And I think that's where the nature of supply chain will more than likely change, specifically in our industry, in the mobility industry, around third-party management groups like RMCs, where they've historically had their set networks and they work with them and they make everything that they need to deliver to their clients work with those providers, with that network. I think that's where we'll probably see things changing, is there will be different provider types that we're going to see coming into the marketplace over the next 6 to 12 months that have cottoned on to what's happened now and actually say there is a space for these service offerings. And I think, Alistair, what you said earlier on is everything was trending in this direction anyway. All that COVID has done is exacerbated.
Yeah.
It's just made it move a lot quicker, really, at the end of the day.
The quality of the questions and comments that are coming into the Q&A are amazing, and practically every single one of them could be a briefing on its own. So I'm going to bring in a few things. Maria Curry, you raise a very interesting point. If you're working with an RMC and you're currently paying either a marketing fee or you're paying a referral fee, do you see that that is likely to change, or could you renegotiate that?
I think we could try. I'm not sure how successful we'd be. I think everyone's under pressure. I think RMCs are under just as much pressure to balance their books, and they're getting requests from us for exceptions and requests from clients to do things quicker and cheaper. So again, I'm not sure. Like I say, the conversations I've had in the last 6 months with at least 3 RMCs have been great. We have looked at a slightly different scope just for one particular client, and that worked really well. The one bugbear I have, which I've mentioned on all 3 of these different calls, is an industry still obsessed with a half-day accompanied service, and I don't really know what that is or how that works. It's pretty tricky from a DSP perspective, but I think referral commission, to answer the question, is here to stay.
I agree with Alistair, and I think it's becoming more common as opposed to the opposite direction.
Renee Stegman, thank you, Renee. Did you know that DSP service fee makes up 2% of the total cost of a full relocation? We do, and it's a very, very well-made point. And yet the service, holds so much accountability from the point of view of duty of care. If you have well-trained consultants on the ground and trained appropriately, they could, in our locations, negotiate a rental agreement that would save the fee 10 times. Are clients focusing on the wrong price push points?
I think Alistair hit that earlier on. When you're speaking to the procurement teams, they don't know anything about mobility and what's involved in mobility. These guys are used to running, multi-billion-dollar deals in purchasing, and suddenly somebody's tapped them on the shoulder and said, well, we need you to go and negotiate this for our global mobility package as well. And they're just coming in it and saying, we want everything brought down by this much. So absolutely, I think there could be education. I think when you're speaking directly to direct clients and their procurement teams, there needs to be more education from that side, whether they are actually interested in learning and how important their mobility packages are to them. So whether your internal stakeholders are actually really partnering with the procurement team to make things happen and explain how things are happening as well. Third parties, when you're dealing with RMCs, I think you've got a lot more leeway there because they understand it better. It's going to depend on which client they're negotiating on behalf of and how they take that into consideration. I've been on particular calls with clients in the past where we've gone through all the metrics, talking about the network and what they're capable of, and factoring that into costs and saying, this is what you're getting. And this was for a VIP program. And they weren't interested in that. And as soon as I started talking about the culture and how, I saw somebody throw up services and bread into us in this industry. It's part and parcel of what we do. And as soon as I started paying lip service to that and talked about how this provider cared for their customers and how they would be there over the weekend, putting up a shelf, and made those connections with how these providers performed, that resonated more with the procurement guy because he had been given a very particular task from his HR team on what they wanted to do for their EVIP crew. So it comes down to who you're speaking to, how well they're educated, or how well you can educate them. And dare I say it, how brave you are. Because there is a big part of this is when you're going to stand your ground, you need to be willing to understand that they might not respect you any less. They might respect you more, but they might say, okay, love that, really appreciate the honesty, respect you so much, go find somebody else.
So just to add to that point, to add to Renee's point, firstly, I did know that percentage because Renee, Marie and I have regular calls, and it's Renee's favourite topic of conversation. So we are aware of that. We do talk about it a lot, and she's absolutely right. And again, in my experience, maybe this, I don't know if this is naive or not, but I have a really good relationship with a couple of RMCs in particular, and we talk about this a lot. So when we have our quarterly business review, one of the things they're really keen to understand is talk me through the deposit claims when they were received, and then what they were at the end, and how you managed to negotiate a difference, and add that up over a year. How much of you and your expertise, Peggy, your word knowledge, how much has your knowledge as an organisation saved our company in deposit claims, which is a massive number? And then also looking at the number of new tenancies we've signed, what was the initial rental price? What did you negotiate it to? And times that by the length of the assignment, and that is a huge number. And so if you put those two together and say by using a DSP you can save X, then the cost of a 2-day home search is a drop in the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that all chimes in very well with two similar points which have come through from Sharon Michenet and from Mary-Lise Garcia. Sharon says, it isn't a question of changing prices. What took 2 days to do previously now takes longer. The service client used to get 2 days is not the same. We have had good success in obtaining more time, either upfront or mid-service, but it's not sustainable for the client. We need to define what the extra is and package it. And Mary-Lise says, we talk about negotiating fees with current clients. What about with potential and new clients? Is it easy to attract new clients at this point, knowing the pandemic hit most of the companies hard? And if so, what approach will you take in terms of your fee structures?
I can jump in there, because I think it is quite an interesting time to speak to new prospective clients, because now more than ever, if you're an HR manager, you don't want to be doing this yourself. You don't want to be, bundling through it and trying to do it and suggesting houses and going on Rightmove and signing tenancies for your employee because you only do this once or twice a year, which is, that is the case for some companies. HR managers are given a huge amount of different things to do. Right now, it's the ultimate time to outsource that to somebody like us or Marie. And also, I think, with the lump sum approach, do you really want to be giving one of your employees some cash to go on to Google or look at a list of preferred providers and start from scratch when health and safety, like I've said so many times before, used to be a cliche and now is the #1 priority. So I think it's a really interesting time to talk to prospective clients, and I think the role of our industry is more important than ever. So we should, and I have these conversations with other DSPs that we should be brave and we should say we're not just desperate for revenue and looking for anything. We should say this is an incredibly valuable service at the moment, more so than ever, and therefore has a cost. So I definitely believe that.
I totally agree with you, Alistair. Sorry, Maria. Just to say that, yes, it's care.
Yeah.
And if you can engage on that subject correctly with any client, it doesn't matter who it is, everybody understands it much more today than they did 6 months ago before.
I agree with Alistair and Fiona, and I think, HR, they won't want another headache, so they won't want to go with the lowest price and the cheapest provider. They'll want quality, and they'll want someone to take care of their assignees and that go the extra mile and, are focused on service. So I don't think price is going to be the main pressing point.
So I'm going to throw a spanner in the wheel quickly. Because I can.
That's nothing new, James.
Go on, James.
Continue the way you're going.
I think everything that you're talking about, the care and the health and safety aspects and the likes of, these are very real things that have been progressively coming in, and more so over the last 5 years, have been an absolute requirement of what we need to have in place to deliver services to corporate clients. And just like a service number, if you deliver a good service number, I'm thinking when you look at clients and what they're going to buy, that is just an expectation that all those things that you're talking about happen in the service delivery. And I mention this because I had a very good conversation with somebody last week, and their approach to things were, we're not selling a service. Because as soon as you talk about selling a service, anybody in procurement is going to want to find that service for the lowest cost possible, because that service encapsulates everything that you guys have talked about. what you're selling is time and knowledge.
Knowledge.
You know, time is time. You have to charge for it. And then knowledge, that talks about how well your clients, your customers are cared for. So I don't think we have to change significantly what we're doing today and how we approach things. I know sometimes I can probably ruffle the cart a little bit because people think that maybe I'm trying to take the empathy out of what we do and the fact that this is more vocational than an office job where you just sit down and do something. But I do think we have to maybe try and change the way we speak about it. Be careful about the words that we choose to use and how that impacts with our clients that we're speaking to, because just those two words, as opposed to talking to me about a service and talking to me about time and knowledge, that really resonated with me. And I think it will resonate with a lot of other buyers as well and make them understand a little bit better what's going on.
Thank you. That ties in very nicely with the comment from Shirley Doran, who says, I think that anyone who works in this industry has an inherent customer service delivery and is giving 100%. It's in your nature and DNA. It's very difficult to pull back when you need to see a family settled. Going above and beyond is part and parcel. And it should be duty of care and compliance to ensure that the assignee is protected. Yeah, there's a very interesting comment here from Adrian Leach, which is going to take us in a slightly different direction, but I think it's something that we should look at, and we're going to look at it again in the full forum. Tracy Kautzman has actually put forward a panel suggestion on this. Do the panel expect more remote and home working, resulting in less cases moving forward when this crisis is over? If they do, what are the likely impacts to the industry, including the impact on fees and prices submitted for long-term tenders?
I'm going to jump in immediately and then everybody can take over. But I know because we see it and we discuss it in the immigration field. Yes, it's come up because today in immigration, there are very few countries who have a visa for remote workers. And we have two groups. We have the digital nomad and we have the teleworker. And very few countries have anything. And it's coming up the whole time, the question. So it's obviously there.
I guess my question to that would be, is it sustainable insofar as, you know, the idea is really hot. It's definitely been pushed forward because of the situation that we've been in over the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months. We can see that it's very doable, but there's a huge amount of sectors out there that cannot survive unless they're put on the ground. So I think it goes back to everything that we've been saying before. I kind of wonder if this virtual or remote assignment is going to come in and stay. It's going to come in, yes. Whether it's going to stay. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, in fact. I managed a remote team for 6 years. 3 of those 6 years was actually about changing up the team and making sure I had the right team that I could manage remotely. And we could actually successfully do what we needed to do. So if you think of anybody going on a remote or virtual assignment for 3 years, that's just going to be spent putting a team together.
But is anybody going to go on an assignment for 3 years now?
That's the question. Yeah, that is the question.
I think that everybody's seen a lot of assignments now, which are, you've got some which are still the traditional 3-5 years, but you've got a lot now who are under 12 months.
Or local hires.
And then you've got you've got the generational factor that you have a lot of young people who want to go into this mode. They want to travel and they want to work.
Thank you. And that chimes in very nicely with a question or comment from Madeleine McKiley, who broadens that topic out into, and what would you do or propose to your customer to avoid loss of business? They're looking at virtual assignments. Because from my point of view, that becomes a psychological and emotional issue.
So if you're talking about a customer who's trying to work on talent acquisition, I would say that they have to work on a really good program, and because they want the talent, and they've got to fully accompany them. So they definitely need all the services, top service from Alistair, Marie, hands-on. Person wants to go for 4 months. into Dubai. He goes for 4 months into Dubai. Then he wants to go to Canada, and then he goes somewhere else. And then actually Canada, I really liked it. And I'd like to have a PR to Canada. And if you want to keep the talent, you'll have to follow the trend, because otherwise the talent will go elsewhere. But that's just for talent. I mean, James is going to talk about project management, and the engineer, he just has to follow. He doesn't, he obeys.
But here's the reality of it. Talent is what, you know, we're hiring, yeah, there's a big pool for talent, but the people who actually do the job, that's where the numbers come in. That's where we're going to be servicing, and that's where we're going to, you know, kind of look at it. If you're a carpenter, you knock out some simple wooden chairs that make you money and that keep the bread coming in. Mm. Then every now and again you get, you know, brought on to do a really bespoke one-off piece. And that's what we're looking at. Yeah, you will have those sorts of assignees that we will need to look after and we'll need to adapt to and consult on, but we still have the bread makers that we're going to carry on delivering services for. I don't think it's going to overtake our industry the way that lump sum has come in and actually impacted our industry significantly.
So I'm just going to throw out something to that, James, to you. I had a very good conversation, and it's very open because I'm working on a paper for him. Well, for us, but with him. I had this conversation. Some of you may know Gary Burr from Capgemini. So first of all, they had zero cutoff in services from day one to their clients, which is pretty amazing, especially for anybody who knows India well, because a lot of engineers in India don't have laptops. So it means in 24 hours, they had to get laptops delivered to these people. And they have now realized that over 50% of their assignments will not happen any longer. They will be working virtually for their clients. And it's the clients who've told them that. It's not them. Clients have said, actually, we don't need your engineers on site.
Yeah.
There's the same comments come through twice, which is basically, thank you, Renee, and for an anonymous attendee as well. Why is quality not considered a metric in the procurement pricing process?
It'll always be considered a metric in the procurement exercise. It's just an expectation. So I don't think it will define you and it will put you above the rest when you're there. But it's not something that you can sell because people expect to get service when they're buying a service.
They expect high quality anyway. Yeah.
So you're saying, James, regardless of the price, they expect the same quality?
Well, the right price, they expect the right quality. And once again, I'm going to be careful about saying that. There are people expect the same quality for a lower price. Absolutely. I'm not going to talk from their standpoint. I can talk about what the expectations are because I've been faced up against those. But you know, yeah, there's absolutely, I've dealt with clients who expect exactly the same quality and same service for a lower cost.
But what's the definition of quality?
That's a measurable metric, isn't it? And I get where you're coming from. So there's quality is measured in a lot of different ways. And I would say typically it's your customer's overall satisfaction. Are they satisfied with the service that they received?
But then you have to be careful that you don't, that you do differentiate quality from quantity. Right?
Now we're getting that whole other conversation that we can go into. How service is defined and measured.
Very nice question from
How do you charge for knowledge? How do you actually charge?
And we talked about this when we had our pre-session briefing last week, and particularly, you know, Alistair and Marie. Implementing new technological tools towards DSP delivery services will represent an extra edge in negotiating higher fees with direct and RMCs. Is it worth the investment?
Yeah, so, well, from our perspective, we've launched and implemented a lot of virtual services over the last few months, and I'll be honest in saying that there hasn't been much uptake, very little. You know, people still want the face-to-face and the old traditional services. We've implemented them. We've used a lot of online and available tools to us, so we haven't spent a fortune in creating these new virtual offerings. But yeah, very little uptake on them, which we've been surprised on, to be honest. And I think, you know, moving forward, I don't see there being a big uptake from what we see at the moment.
Oh, Alistair, for some reason I can't hear you.
Can you now?
Yeah, you're very quiet though.
Oh, really? Don't know why.
Sorry about that. It's Zoom is having a moment. Anyway, go on. Just talk loudly.
Okay, shall I shout? Sorry. I would just add to that I think for us, technology will play the part of more of a back office function. So like I said earlier, I think if we can become more efficient, less data entry, allowing our guys to spend more time with assignees on the phone, then that in effect will help our fee structure. So a particular case is easier to manage and quicker to manage, and we're more efficient because the things we're taking lots of time doing can be automated. So we want to automate the back office, not necessarily our connection with the assignee, because I think that takes away some of the personal connection. So that's our take on it. So I do definitely think it's worth the investment, but from a slightly different perspective.
That's certainly what we tried to do at EuRA. Question from Dominic Conan. Well, a comment on a question. International local hires who start working from home abroad can solve travel, immigration and relocation problems, but it potentially opens up huge social security and tax issues for the employer, especially if there is no presence or establishment in the country where the local hire is coming from and staying. How do you as a DSP go about this with your clients? Are there solutions?
Good question. For us, most of the if we're working with an RMC, not our responsibility. If we're working with a direct client, we'll have those conversations, but it doesn't sound right, but it's not really under our remit. So we'd make our clients aware, but they generally would have their own provider, their own tax and social security provider. So it's not actually something we would touch. I don't know if Marie would agree.
Yeah, I would be the same, Alistair, as you. That would be, I suppose, outside of our remit. Obviously, we'd advise and recommend who they could speak to, but it isn't something that we would deal with.
We are coming to time. Thank you to everybody who put forward questions. It's been an extremely interesting debate. And like I say, I think we're going to have to come back to this quite frequently. Peggy, I'll hand over to you to summarise.
Well, first, I just want to say if there still are questions out there that haven't been answered, are all of the panelists okay with people getting in touch with you and without inundating you with questions and more comments? Because I think all of you have raised really great thoughts. And like I said, I guess we do have a couple of golden nuggets that we've learned from this, but there's no one solution. And we're all going to be kind of navigating this together, and who knows what the future will be. So if that's okay, I'd like to just throw that out to everybody. Please get in touch with any of these people. You know how to contact them, I believe. And I just appreciate so many people attending, and I hope this has been, at least I hope it's met your expectations, everybody. And I certainly think it was a great discussion, and I want to thank all the panelists and Dom, as always, for creating these great opportunities for all of us during this time. I'm afraid we're going to have to continue it even not during this time. Hopefully this time will be over soon.
Thanks, Peggy.
Yeah, exactly.
Really? Yeah, I echo that, Peggy. Thank you very much indeed. And like I say, if you do want to get in touch with any of our panelists, obviously you can do this in the normal routes of communication, but you can also, if you are signed up for the EuRA Full Forum, which is basically if you are signed up for Seville, which was happening in March, but is now happening in June next year, you are automatically in the app. So you can contact everybody on this panel via the Hoover app if you're signed up for next year. I would, again, Peggy, Fiona, James, Marie, Alistair, thank you so much for being part of this. It has raised a lot of questions, and I think we will definitely be looking at these topics significantly again. So thank you very much for being part of this. Thank you to everybody who attended. I will get this edited and up on our YouTube channel next week, so you will be able to go back over it. And thank you for everybody who is putting very nice messages. Adrian, thank you. Messages of thanks and congratulating you on being a super fantastic panel. So super fantastic panel. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks. We'll see you soon. And we do the customary Zoom wave goodbye. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Peggy. Thanks, Dom.
Thanks, everybody.